Welcome back to the deep dive. Look, usually when we talk about personal finance, we are talking about spreadsheets or maybe a little bit about tax efficiency.
Right. Or how to save 5% on your car insurance. That's polite stuff.
Yeah, it's polite, it's safe.
Mm.
But today we are stripping away that polite veneer entirely. We're not talking about finance as some kind of weekend hobby.
No, definitely not.
We are looking at money through a much darker, much more primal lens. We are talking about finance as a survival mechanism in a genuinely hostile environment.
It is a complete shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Most financial advice assumes the system is neutral or maybe even benevolent.
Like the bank is your friend.
Exactly. Like the bank wants you to succeed and the government wants you to be wealthy. But the source material we are covering today takes the exact opposite stance. It assumes the system is actively trying to hunt you down, strip your assets, and just leave you with nothing.
It's combat, plain and simple. And before we get into the trenches, I have a specific mission for you listening right now. If you value this kind of unfiltered breakdown, where we explore the ideas the mainstream usually ignores or actively tries to suppress, hit that like and subscribe button immediately.
It really helps beat the algorithm.
It does. It helps us keep the lights on, and it keeps these deep dives coming to you. Done. Good. So today, we are unpacking a book titled UK Personal Finances, A Guide for Britons to Manage Their Dosh by Conrad Riker.
And please do not let the word dosh in the title fool you.
Yeah, it sounds a bit cheeky, doesn't it?
It does, but this isn't some lighthearted romp through the UK banking system with a cup of tea. Riker frames this book as a literal field manual. He explicitly calls it tactical training.
It is aggressive right out of the gate. I mean, the preface alone is like getting hit with a bucket of ice water. He essentially says, look, if you think toxic masculinity is the world's biggest problem, or if you want financial advice that feels like a warm group hug,
Put the book down.
yeah, put it down immediately and go bake sourdough. He wrote this specifically for men who are tired of apologizing for wanting to build wealth, power, and sovereignty.
It's for the guys who feel like the deck is entirely stacked against them. And if what we discuss today strikes a chord, and honestly I think for a lot of you it absolutely will, you are going to want to pick up the full manual.
We can only give you the reconnaissance report here today.
Right, the actual step-by-step protocols, the legal structures, the specific investment vehicles, that is all in the book. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks right now, so you should definitely go grab it.
So let's establish the battlefield here. Riker's core premise is that modern Britain, and he argues the entire Western world really, is a financial minefield. He claims it's specifically designed to strip men of three things: power, purpose, and pounds.
That is a massive claim to make.
It sounds almost conspiratorial on the surface, right? So what is his actual basis for this?
Well, he grounds it in institutional history, which is actually fascinating. The stated mission of this deep dive today is to understand the history of our major institutions, banks, courts, corporate structures, and to look at them before, as Riker puts it, they were captured by feminists and Marxists.
He really doesn't mince words there. Let's make it clear we're reporting his thesis here, but he goes hard.
Oh, he goes very hard. He argues there is this double bind placed on men today. On one hand, society absolutely relies on male competence. We desperately need men to pour concrete rig oil platforms in the North Sea, freezing temperatures, run into burning buildings.
Because civilization literally requires that hardness to function. The dirty, dangerous jobs are still overwhelmingly done by men. I think the stat he uses in the book is pretty overwhelming.
It is. 93% of workplace fatalities are men. Riker points that out very early on, just to set the stage. But here is the bind. While society needs that grit to function, the corporate world and the HR departments pathologize the very traits required to do those jobs.
They label aggression, risk-taking, stoicism, all of that as toxic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet they depend entirely on the results of that behavior to keep the lights on and the building standing.
He illustrates this with a really visceral story about a guy named Dave. And this story really stuck with me because I think we've all met a Dave.
The demolition expert.
Yeah. So picture this scenario. Dave is on a demolition site. He's a rough guy. He's survived on-site explosions. He knows his trade inside and out. He's not there to be polite. He's there to bring buildings down safely.
Right.
Then an intern, some kid who doesn't know the ropes at all, is walking straight toward a live detonation zone, literally seconds away from being blown to pieces.
It's an immediate life or death moment.
Exactly. Now, Dave doesn't write a polite email. He doesn't schedule a Zoom meeting to discuss safety protocols with HR. He screams at the kid. He uses some very colorful, very aggressive language, and he physically grabs him to stop him.
He saves the kid's life. That is the bottom line of the interaction.
It completely saves his life.
Yeah.
And the result? Does Dave get a medal? Does he get a performance bonus? No. Dave gets fired.
Unbelievable.
Not for safety violations, but for using aggressive language and refusing anger management training.
It's a perfect example of what Riker calls the safety culture paradox.
Yeah.
You have to be tough enough to survive the actual job, but polite enough to satisfy an HR department that has never once set foot in a danger zone.
And he connects this directly to finance, right?
He does. He argues that if you suppress that Dave energy, that masculine drive to aggressively assess risk and act decisively, you become terrible at managing money. This is where he transitions into what he calls the risk calculus.
Break that down for us.
So Riker argues that testosterone isn't just a hormone for muscle growth. It is a biological driver for economic expansion. He looks at the history of the city of London, for instance. Take Nathan Rothschild.
Right. The Battle of Waterloo?
Yes. When Rothschild bet his entire fortune on the outcome of Waterloo, relying on carrier pigeons and his own gut instinct, he wasn't embracing his vulnerability.
He wasn't sitting in a circle sharing his feelings.
No, he wasn't seeking validation at all. He was engaging in high-stakes masculine competition.
But the modern narrative we get fed is the exact opposite of that. We are told constantly that men need to be softer, more empathetic, more in touch with their emotions.
And Riker calls the result of that the creation of herbivore men. It's a term he borrows from Japan's social crisis. Men who have essentially checked out of the dating market, checked out of the career ladder, and are content to just exist quietly.
Socially neutered is the phrase he uses, I think.
Yes, they are socially neutered. And Riker's observation on this is brutal, but very sharp. He says no one cheers for a crying trader.
It's entirely true. When the market is crashing, when your portfolio is down 40%, you don't want your broker to be weeping in the corner of his office.
You want detached, decisive action. He cites data suggesting Fortune 500 CEOs have significantly higher testosterone levels than the average population. His point is that in a crisis, whether it's a market crash or a house fire, empathy is a massive liability.
You need to be cold to make the right move.
Exactly. The system, he argues, is actively trying to drug you into being soft, and being soft makes you poor.
Okay, so if society is the enemy here, and they are trying to soften you up just to shear you like a sheep, how do we actually fight back? Segment 2 of the book is all about the mechanics of this war. He calls it compound interest warfare.
I love that he rebrands saving as warfare.
It completely changes the psychology, doesn't it? It's not saving for a rainy day, which sounds passive and kind of weak. It's deploying troops. Every pound or dollar you have is a soldier on the field.
And Riker's very clear in this section. The ultimate enemy is delay.
Let's break down the math on this because I think people hear compound interest and their eyes just immediately glaze over. But Riker puts a literal price tag on procrastination that is terrifying.
He really does. He uses a very standard model to make the point.
Yeah.
If you start investing 500 pounds a month at age 25, assuming an 8% average return, which is the standard historical market performance.
Right, that's realistic.
Highly realistic. You hit age 65 with over 1.2 million pounds. You're a millionaire. You have achieved absolute financial sovereignty.
Okay, so that is the baseline. That's mission success.
But, and here is the absolute killer, if you wait until you're 35.
Just 10 years later.
Just 10 years. 10 years of living your life or finding yourself or partying in Ibiza. If you start at 35 doing the exact same thing, 500 a month at 8%, that final number is cut in half.
That is staggering.
You lose over 600,000 pounds.
You literally lose more money on the back end than you actually earn during that entire decade of messing around.
Exactly. Riker frames this as surrendering territory. If you delay, you aren't just starting late. You have voluntarily handed over half your empire to the enemy.
But there is another enemy attacking your flank while you try to build this wealth up, isn't there?
Inflation.
Or as Riker calls it, systematic plunder.
He is very red-pilled on central banking in this book. He goes all the way back to the Nixon shock of 1971. He does. And for those who might not know the history, before 1971, major currencies were tied to gold. You couldn't just print money out of the thin air. You had to have the actual physical metal in a vault to back it up.
It was honest money.
Right, it was honest. Nixon severed that link completely. Since then, money is fiat, which is Latin for let it be done. It has value only because the government points a gun and says it does.
And Riker points out that since this shift, since the government gave itself the power to print unlimited money, the British pound has lost over 99% of its purchasing power.
99%.
That isn't a dip in the market. That is a total collapse.
It's a silent tax. He uses what he calls the bacon index to make this real for the reader. Imagine you're standing in Tesco or Sainsbury's staring at a pack of bacon. It's the exact same amount of bacon as last year.
Right, the pig didn't suddenly get harder to raise.
Exactly. But the price has doubled. You haven't become poorer in terms of your effort. You worked just as hard as last year. But your stirred energy, your money, has leaked value because the government printed more of it to pay their own debts.
So what is the tactical move against that? If cash is just trash, where do you go?
You move to hard assets, things the government absolutely cannot print more of. Gold, property, certain commodities. But even more importantly, Riker changes how you view the emergency fund.
Most people think of an emergency fund as insurance. Like, oh, I hope I don't ever need this.
Riker calls it warfare rations.
That shifts the mindset entirely from safety to being under siege.
Exactly. You cannot attack the market. You cannot take aggressive risks with your career or your business if you are terrified of starving next month. You need a stockpile so you can operate offensively.
You need to be able to say no to a bad boss or a raw deal.
And you can only do that if you have those rations secured.
Now, speaking of major threats to your wealth, we have to pivot to what is arguably the most controversial section of the entire book. We're moving into feminine finance dynamics and the divorce trap.
We are. And we really need to be clear here. We are impartially reporting Riker's arguments from the text.
Yes, these are his views, not ours.
These are definitely not mainstream views. You won't hear this discussed on the BBC. But they are completely central to his thesis on preserving your wealth. He dedicates a huge portion of the book to the idea that men and women are biologically wired differently when it comes to money.
He cites some research claiming women spend 63% more on mood-driven purchases.
Right? He talks about retail therapy as essentially a dopamine pursuit. Riker contrasts this with what he believes is the male biological imperative, which is to build empires. He argues that in a modern relationship, this creates severe financial polarity.
Because if one person is trying to build a fortified castle and the other is buying throw pillows to feel better on a Tuesday, the fortress never gets built.
And if that fortress eventually collapses, you end up in family court. This is where the book gets exceptionally dark. He tells the story of John.
The plumber. This story is practically designed to keep you up at night. John is your typical grafter. He works 80-hour weeks, completely destroys his knees, builds a highly profitable plumbing business with his own bare hands.
He sacrifices absolutely everything for his family.
And his wife, according to Riker's account of the case, never once handled a wrench. She never dealt with an angry client. She never fixed a frozen pipe at 2 a.m.
But the marriage ends.
And she walks away with 60% of the assets, the business value, the savings, the future revenue. Riker describes the family court system as a literal meat grinder for men.
He argues it is structurally rigged against the provider. The system assumes the man pays, regardless of who actually did the heavy lifting to build the wealth.
So short of just taking a vow of celibacy and never getting married, what is his actual solution here?
He gets very tactical. First, prenups. But he emphasizes they have to be drafted when emotions are cool, not 2 weeks before the wedding when everyone is stressed. Second, financial fidelity. You need to be honest about the numbers, but you also need defense tactics.
This is where he suggests basically hiding money, isn't it? Or at least moving it out of reach.
He calls it asset protection, but yes, effectively. He talks about bloodline engineering and using offshore trusts. The core concept is simple. If you own it, you can lose it. If a trust owns it, and you merely control the trust, the family court has a much harder time handing it over to your ex-spouse.
Can you explain that distinction for you listening? Owning versus controlling.
Sure, think of it like a company car. You get to drive the car every day, you decide where it goes, you put the fuel in it, but your name isn't on the title. You don't own the car.
Yeah.
If you get sued personally, they can't take the car away because it's simply not yours.
And Riker suggests doing this with practically everything.
Everything. Put your house, your investments, your warfare rations into legal structures that are totally separate from you as an individual flesh and blood person. Make yourself paper poor, but control rich.
That sounds incredibly complex and probably quite expensive to set up with lawyers.
It is expensive. But Riker argues that a divorce is infinitely more expensive.
Fair point.
He also touches heavily on relationship selection. He references a Cambridge study claiming that despite all the modern cultural narratives about fierce independence, women ultimately deeply desire a provider.
And he warns against something he calls asymmetric financial demotion. What is that exactly?
That's where you are living on rice and beans to aggressively save for the future, you're sacrificing your today for a secure tomorrow, and your partner is leasing a brand new Audi. He says that imbalance is an absolute relationship killer. You need to be fighting the exact same war, not fighting each other over resources.
Which perfectly brings us to lifestyle choices. Because you might think a guy writing a whole manual about building empires and asserting masculine power would tell you to go buy a Ferrari to show off. But Riker says the exact opposite. Segment 4 is about minimalism as freedom.
This is a crucial distinction. He distinguishes between actually being poor and being strategically deployed. He introduces a brilliant concept called beamer masking.
Beamer masking, I loved this term when I read it. It is so descriptive of what we see every day.
It's tragic, really. It refers to men, usually over 50, who lease highly expensive BMWs or Mercedes. They project this massive success. They look the part driving around town.
But the car is just a mess.
Completely. Behind the Beamer is zero retirement savings, rapidly mounting debt, and a desperate, suffocating need to keep working a job they hate just to pay the monthly lease. They are camouflaging their total financial failure with a flashy car payment.
It's all signaling and absolutely no substance. They become slaves to the image.
Riker aggressively advocates for the opposite approach. He shares his own personal story of swapping out a luxury Rolex for a 12-pound Casio watch.
A 12-pound watch, and the sky didn't fall.
The world didn't end at all. His competence at his job didn't drop one bit, but his liquidity grew. He realized that the Rolex was just a signal to other men, but the Casio was a signal to himself that he no longer needed their approval.
He introduces the yacht test, too, which I thought was a great mental model.
Yes, the yacht test is a mental filter for any big purchase. You ask yourself, would I buy this if it was pitched to me while sitting in a life raft? It completely strips away the glamour. He warns readers, don't ever confuse charisma with competence.
Just because an investment manager wears a bespoke suit or drives a nice car doesn't mean he won't lose all your money.
Usually that flash is just dragging you down with high fees.
But he isn't saying you should become a total hermit living in the woods. He talks a lot about networking, but he rebrands it as brotherhood capital.
This was fascinating historical context. He traces the entire concept of insurance back to the Freemasons and medieval stonemason guilds. These weren't just guys wearing funny aprons and doing secret handshakes in the dark.
They were mutual aid funds.
Exactly. If a stonemason fell off a cathedral scaffold and broke his leg, the brotherhood paid out to feed his family. That very raw concept eventually evolved into huge modern institutions like Lloyd's of London.
So he wants the reader to bring back that old school tight-knit network.
He wants you to build your own local version of it. He tells this insane story about the 2008 financial crash. 2 hedge fund managers.
Yeah.
One is totally insolvent and needs a massive bridge loan immediately or his firm goes under by morning. The other guy has cash on hand.
They didn't call the lawyers to draft it up.
They didn't wait for a bank transfer that takes 3 business days and involves 10 different compliance officers sniffing around.
So what do they actually do?
They use the combination code of their shared locker at a private boxing gym. One guy put the verification materials and collateral documents in the locker. The other guy retrieved it and authorized the funds. The deal was done purely on trust and speed.
No regulators checking boxes.
No bureaucracy at all. Just a memorized code and a handshake, effectively. Riker uses this to illustrate that brotherhood networks, small groups of highly competent men who trust each other implicitly, can move significantly faster than the rigged system.
He tells listeners to build a tribe that trades actionable intel, stock tips, legal strategies, business opportunities, not just guys you drink beer with and complain about sports.
It's entirely about efficiency and survival. When the grid goes down, or the banks freeze your accounts, or the regulations change overnight to target you, who do you call? If your answer is customer service, you're already dead. You need a tribe.
That brings us perfectly to the end game of the book. Segment 5, Health and Legacy. Because ultimately, you can't spend the money or fight the war if you're dead.
Riker calls this the health-wealth nexus. And this isn't just generic eat your veggies advice. He brings hard actuarial data. Men who live to 85 accumulate 370% more wealth than those who die at 65.
370%, that is a massive difference. That is the difference between leaving a little nest egg and leaving true generational wealth.
Think about the math on it. That is 20 extra years of compounding interest. It's 20 uninterrupted years of your hard assets appreciating. But even more importantly, if you die at 65, After a long, drawn-out sickness, you have likely drained your family's resources on expensive medical care.
You transform from an asset into a massive liability.
Precisely. So staying fit isn't vanity, it's a literal fiduciary duty to your estate. He warns again against becoming those herbivore men who just rot away on the couch playing video games and drain the economy.
You need to lift weights. You need to be physically robust so you don't become a weak statistic that loses the game in the fourth quarter.
And then there's the final piece, what you actually leave behind. He calls it legacy engineering.
This goes way beyond just drafting a last will and testament. He brings up Jeremy Bentham, the philosopher, right?
The utilitarian philosopher, yes. Bentham famously had his skeleton preserved, dressed in his actual clothes, and placed in a glass cabinet at University College London. It's known as his auto icon.
And it still attends board meetings, doesn't it?
It does. Riker absolutely loves this because it represents the ultimate masculine power move, projecting your influence and authority far beyond the grave.
That is bizarre. I am not entirely sure I want my skeleton sitting in the hallway of my grandkid's house.
It is deeply eccentric. But Riker suggests the modern digital equivalent, recording detailed video messages on the blockchain, using specific services like memory of, so that your tactical advice, your voice, and your philosophy persist immutably for your great-grandchildren.
He wants you to be an active patriarch for centuries, not just a fading memory in a photo album.
But he also wants to aggressively protect the money from the kids. He is utterly obsessed with preventing spoiled heirs.
Ah, yes, the Ibiza benders.
Right. He says if you just leave a massive pile of unearned cash, your kids will inevitably blow it on parties in Ibiza or terrible investments, and you will have spent your life building an empire for absolutely nothing.
So how do you stop that from beyond the grave?
He advocates for strict incentive trusts. The trust only pays out when the heir hits a specific verifiable milestone. They have to graduate from a rigorous university or start a profitable business or maintain documented sobriety. You are literally using the capital to parent them from the grave.
You are forcing them to be competent. You're trying to build a resilient dynasty, not just fund an endless vacation for ungrateful kids.
Exactly.
So putting this all together, we have covered institutional history, biology, compound interest warfare, brutal divorce law, and blockchain legacy. What is the final provocation here for you listening?
Riker's entire philosophy really boils down to one phrase: Spartan resilience. He deeply believes that achieving total financial sovereignty is the only viable way to escape the matrix of modern British institutions.
He argues that the government, the central banks, the mainstream cultural critics, they are all betting heavily on you being weak.
They are betting on you being impulsive, blindly consumerist, and entirely dependent on them for your safety and permission.
And the only way to truly win is to aggressively opt out of their rigged game and play your own. Stop apologizing for being a man. Stop explaining yourself to people who hate you.
Start building hard assets that they simply cannot touch.
It is a profound call to action for rational men to stop asking for permission to prosper.
And look, in a world that often feels chaotic and openly hostile to traditional masculinity, that is a very powerful, very necessary message to internalize.
It really is. Now listen, we've covered a huge amount of ground today, from the ideological capture of our institutions to the very specific mechanics of offshore asset protection. But let me be clear, we have barely scratched the paint.
Not even close.
Yeah.
This book is incredibly dense with actionable tactics.
If you are serious about this, if you want the full field manual on how to actually execute these strategies step by step, you need to buy the book today. Go search for UK Personal Finances, a guide for Britons to manage their dosh by Conrad Riker.
It is available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Do not wait on this.
And for ongoing strategies, because the financial landscape and the legal traps change every single year, you need to follow the author directly. Go to Substack and follow @ConradRiker. That is where you'll get the real-time tactical updates.
It is definitively worth the read if you want to understand the deeper why behind the what of your money.
Absolutely. And to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything Riker lays out, think about the push for central bank digital currencies, the digital pound. If Riker is right about the current system treating inflation as plunder, imagine what happens to your sovereignty when the state can literally program your money, track every purchase, or turn off your wallet with a keystroke because you didn't comply with the latest mandate.
That is the ultimate capture.
It is. The minefield is only getting wider. Prepare accordingly. If you enjoyed this deep dive, if you want us to keep amplifying these kinds of rational, unapologetic voices, please like, subscribe, and share this with your Brotherhood network. It makes a huge difference in beating the censors. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your powder dry.
Stay